Almost no one expects this, but lab reports have quietly revealed a pattern that should make anyone pause before taking the next scoop. Nearly half of tested whey protein products showed signs of contamination or quality issues, and the truth behind this number is far more complicated than it first appears. Not every product is dangerous, not every brand is cutting corners, but enough irregularities have been found to raise serious questions about what is actually inside the powder that millions of people trust every single day. This is not about fear, and it is not about attacking an entire industry. It is about understanding what is real, what is misunderstood, and what is often hidden behind clean labels and bold marketing claims. Because when something becomes part of a daily routine, especially something linked to health and fitness, it deserves a closer look than most people ever give it. Whey protein has built a reputation over the years as one of the simplest and most effective ways to support muscle growth, recovery, and overall nutrition. It is used by beginners trying to get in shape, athletes pushing their limits, and even people who just want a convenient source of protein in a busy day. The trust is strong and the belief is simple that what is written on the label reflects what is inside the container. But recent independent testing and deeper analysis have started to reveal gaps between expectation and reality, and those gaps are where things begin to get uncomfortable. Small traces of substances that were never mentioned, differences in actual protein content compared to what is claimed, and inconsistencies that most consumers would never notice without specialized testing. These are not always headline level dangers, but they are important enough to question the blind confidence that has been built around these products. What makes this even more interesting is that the problem is not always what people assume. Many expect contamination to mean something extreme or immediately harmful, but the reality is more subtle and in some ways more concerning. Tiny amounts of heavy metals can appear due to the environment where ingredients are sourced. Fillers and additives can be used to cut costs without making it obvious on the label. Protein numbers can sometimes be inflated through methods that make the product look stronger than it really is. None of this is easy to spot by taste, smell, or appearance, and that is exactly why it often goes unnoticed. The issue is not about one shocking discovery, but about a pattern that starts to emerge when multiple products are tested under strict conditions. This is where the real story begins to unfold, because once the surface is scratched, a deeper system becomes visible. The supplement industry operates differently from many other food categories, with less strict pre-approval processes in many regions. That does not mean everything is unsafe, but it does mean that responsibility often falls on the companies themselves to maintain quality and honesty. Some do this exceptionally well, investing in testing, transparency, and sourcing. Others focus more on marketing, branding, and cost reduction, knowing that most consumers will never question what they are buying. The result is a wide range of quality where two products that look nearly identical on the shelf can be very different in reality. In this video, everything will be broken down in a clear and simple way so there is no confusion and no unnecessary exaggeration. The meaning behind the 46% claim will be explained, including where it comes from and what it actually represents. The types of contamination or inconsistencies that have been found will be described in a way that is easy to understand without any technical background. The reasons why these issues happen in the first place will be uncovered, including how sourcing, manufacturing, and labeling all play a role. Most importantly, the real level of risk will be clarified, separating what is genuinely concerning from what is often misunderstood or overstated. By the end of this video, there will be a clear understanding of how to look at whey protein in a smarter way, without fear but also without blind trust. It will become easier to recognize what makes a product reliable, what warning signs to watch for, and how to make choices that actually support long-term health instead of just following trends or advertisements. This is not about telling anyone to stop using whey protein, but about making sure that what is being used truly matches what is expected. Because small daily decisions repeated over time can have a much bigger impact than most people realize. There are details in this topic that rarely get discussed openly, not because they are hidden on purpose, but because they require effort to uncover and explain properly. That is exactly what makes this worth watching until the very end, because each part connects to the next and builds a complete picture that cannot be understood from a single headline or statistic. Missing one piece can lead to the wrong conclusion, and that is something this video is designed to prevent. Every section adds clarity, removes confusion, and replaces assumptions with facts that actually make sense. So stay with this all the way through, because what starts as a surprising statistic will turn into a clear and practical understanding that can be used immediately. If simple health truths, honest breakdowns, and real explanations matter, then this is exactly where that journey continues. Welcome to the channel. And if this kind of content is valuable, take a moment to subscribe so nothing important is missed. Trust in whey protein did not happen by accident. It was built over years of marketing, fitness culture, and visible results. Walk into any gym or scroll through any fitness page, and the same message keeps repeating in different forms: that whey protein is clean, that it is one of the safest supplements available, that it is almost a shortcut to better recovery and muscle growth. The image is simple and powerful: a pure white powder mixed into water or milk, quick to drink, easy to digest, and backed by science. That image creates a sense of certainty, and certainty removes doubt. When people feel certain, they stop asking questions. That is exactly what has happened with whey protein. It has moved from being a supplement to being a daily habit, something that feels as normal as eating a meal. Students use it, office workers use it, athletes depend on it, and even people who are not deeply into fitness add it to their routine because it feels like a safe and smart choice. The trust goes even deeper because of how whey protein is positioned. It comes from milk, which already has a natural and healthy reputation. It is associated with strength, muscle, recovery, and discipline. The packaging often reinforces this image with clean designs, simple ingredient lists, and bold claims about purity and quality. Words like isolate, hydrolyzed, ultra-filtered, and high bioavailability are used to create a sense of advanced science and precision. All of this builds a mental picture that what is inside the container is not just safe, but carefully controlled and optimized for health. Most people never look beyond that surface because there is no immediate reason to doubt it. If something is widely used and widely accepted, it starts to feel automatically trustworthy. Daily use strengthens that belief even more. When something becomes part of a routine, it becomes invisible in a way. The scoop goes into the shaker, the drink is consumed, and the day continues. There is no pause to question the source, the processing, or the testing behind it. The focus stays on results, on gym performance, on recovery, on progress. If there are no obvious negative effects, the assumption becomes that everything is fine. That assumption is what makes the next part so important, because it challenges something that feels stable and familiar. Recent testing, done independently and without influence from marketing claims, started to reveal patterns that do not fully match the clean image most people have in their minds. These tests were not designed to create fear, they were designed to measure and verify. Different products from different brands were analyzed under controlled conditions, looking at what was actually present inside the powder compared to what was stated on the label. What emerged was not a simple yes or no answer, but a range of results that showed inconsistencies, variations, and in some cases, unexpected elements that were never clearly communicated to consumers. This is where the sense of certainty begins to shift. The number that stands out the most is the one that catches attention immediately. Around 46% of tested whey protein products showed some form of contamination or quality issue. This does not mean that nearly half of all whey protein is dangerous, and it does not mean that every issue is severe. The word contamination in this context can include small traces, minor discrepancies, or measurable differences that are not visible without testing. But even with that clarification, the number is high enough to raise concern. It suggests that the gap between expectation and reality is not rare, it is common enough to be noticed across multiple products. Understanding this number requires looking at how these tests are conducted. Independent labs use methods that can detect even very small quantities of substances. These methods are far more sensitive than anything a regular consumer could observe. They can measure trace elements, identify compounds, and compare actual protein content to labeled values with precision. When multiple products are tested using the same standards, patterns start to emerge. Some products match their labels closely, showing consistency and quality. Others show small but measurable differences, and a portion shows more noticeable issues that cannot be ignored. The 46% figure comes from this broader picture, not from a single test or a single brand, but from repeated observations across a sample of products. The immediate question that follows is simple and natural. What kind of contamination or issues are being found? The answer is not a single shocking substance, but a combination of different factors that each tell part of the story. One category that often appears in testing results is the presence of heavy metals in trace amounts. Elements like lead, arsenic, cadmium, or mercury can be detected at very low levels. These do not appear because someone added them intentionally, but because of environmental exposure. The soil where cows graze, the water they drink, and the processing environment can all contribute small amounts of these elements. In very tiny quantities, they may not cause immediate harm, but their presence raises questions about long-term exposure, especially when a product is used daily over months or years. Another category involves ingredients that are not clearly declared or not fully transparent on the label. This can include fillers, additives, or compounds that are used to improve texture, taste, or shelf life. Some of these are not harmful on their own, but the issue is the lack of clarity. When a product claims to be pure or minimal, but contains additional substances that are not obvious to the consumer, trust starts to weaken. Transparency becomes just as important as safety, because without it, the consumer cannot make a fully informed decision. Protein spiking is another issue that has been identified in some products. This involves adding cheaper nitrogen-containing compounds to artificially inflate the measured protein content. Standard protein tests often rely on nitrogen levels to estimate protein quantity. By adding certain substances that contain nitrogen, a product can appear to have more protein than it actually does. This does not necessarily make the product dangerous, but it makes it misleading. A person may believe they are consuming a certain amount of protein, while in reality, they are getting less than expected. Over time, this can affect results, performance, and overall nutrition without the person even realizing it. All of these findings point to a central idea that is both simple and important. Not all whey protein products are as pure as they appear on the label. Some are very close to their claims, some fall slightly short, and some have issues that are significant enough to question their quality. The difference is not always visible, and it is not something that can be judged by price, packaging, or popularity alone. This creates a situation where the average consumer who relies on trust and routine may not have enough information to distinguish between high quality and lower quality options. The impact of this realization depends on how it is understood. It is easy to react with fear and assume that everything is unsafe, but that would not be accurate. It is also easy to ignore it and continue as if nothing matters, but that would overlook important details. The more balanced view is to recognize that variability exists, that quality is not uniform across all products, and that awareness is necessary to make better choices. This shifts the mindset from blind trust to informed use without removing the benefits that whey protein can provide when it is sourced and manufactured properly. As more people become aware of these findings, The conversation around supplements begins to change. It moves away from simple claims and toward deeper questions about sourcing, testing, and verification. Consumers start to look for signs of quality beyond marketing language, such as third party testing, certifications, and transparency in ingredient lists. Companies that prioritize these aspects stand out more clearly, while those that rely mainly on branding may face increased scrutiny. This dynamic creates pressure within the industry to improve standards and maintain consistency, which ultimately benefits the consumer. At the same time, the presence of these issues does not erase the value of whey protein itself. It remains one of the most efficient sources of high quality protein, with strong evidence supporting its role in muscle growth and recovery. The key difference is that the focus shifts from the idea that all whey protein is equally good to the understanding that selection matters complete. The trust that people place in whey protein does not disappear, but it evolves. It becomes more selective, more aware, and more grounded in evidence rather than image. The daily scoop remains part of many routines, but the mindset behind it changes from automatic acceptance to conscious choice. That shift may seem small, but over time it shapes better habits, better decisions, and a more realistic understanding of what is being consumed. What makes this situation more complex is not just what was found, but why it keeps happening in the first place. And the answer is not a single reason, but a combination of how the supplement industry operates behind the scenes. Unlike many traditional food products, supplements often enter the market without the same level of strict pre approval testing, which means companies are largely responsible for ensuring the safety and accuracy of what they sell. This does not automatically mean that products are unsafe, but it does create a system where quality can vary depending on how much effort and investment a company is willing to put into testing, sourcing, and manufacturing. In simple terms, in the supplement world, not everything is tested before it reaches you, and that single idea explains more than most people realize because it shifts the responsibility away from a centralized system and places it directly on individual brands, some of which prioritize quality while others focus more on speed and cost. Cost plays a bigger role than most consumers ever see because producing high quality whey protein is not cheap when it is done properly. Sourcing clean raw materials, using advanced filtration processes, maintaining strict hygiene standards, and running repeated laboratory tests all require time, technology, and money. When a company chooses to invest in these areas, the final product reflects that effort. But when the goal shifts toward maximizing profit or competing in a crowded market with lower prices, shortcuts can begin to appear. These shortcuts are not always obvious or extreme. They can be small adjustments that reduce cost without immediately affecting the look or taste of the product. Over time, those small adjustments can lead to measurable differences in quality, and that is where inconsistency begin to show up in testing results. Marketing adds another layer to this picture because in many cases, what a product promises on the outside is not always a perfect reflection of what is happening inside the manufacturing process. Bright labels, strong claims, and powerful words create a sense of confidence that can overshadow the details that actually matter. A product can be described as pure, advanced, or premium, but those words do not always come with strict definitions that guarantee a certain standard. This creates a gap where perception becomes stronger than verification, and consumers are left relying on trust instead of evidence. When multiple brands compete for attention, the pressure to stand out increases, and sometimes that pressure leads to prioritizing appearance and messaging over deeper quality control. The global nature of supply chains also contributes to the issue because ingredients can come from different regions with varying environmental conditions and standards. Milk sources, processing facilities, transportation, and storage all play a role in the final product. If even one part of that chain is not carefully managed, it can introduce variability that affects consistency. For example, environmental factors can influence the presence of trace elements, while differences in processing methods can impact protein structure and purity. These are not always signs of negligence, but they highlight how many steps are involved in producing something that appears simple on the surface. The more steps there are, the more opportunities there are for variation, and without strict oversight at every stage, those variations can become noticeable in testing. Another factor that often goes unnoticed is the difference between minimum standards and optimal standards. A product can meet basic safety requirements and still fall short of what a consumer might expect in terms of purity or accuracy. Meeting a minimum standard does not always mean achieving the highest level of quality, and that distinction becomes important when comparing products across different brands. Some companies aim only to meet the required thresholds, while others go beyond them to ensure consistency and transparency. From the outside, these differences are not always visible, which makes it harder for consumers to distinguish between products that simply meet the minimum and those that truly prioritize quality. This leads to a more realistic understanding of the industry, where not everything is negative, but not everything is perfect either. There are brands that invest heavily in testing and transparency, and there are others that operate with fewer checks and balances. The presence of both creates a mixed environment where quality is not uniform and where awareness becomes essential for making better choices. This is not about assuming the worst, but about recognizing that systems with less strict regulation rely more on individual responsibility, both from companies and from consumers who choose what to buy. When it comes to the question of danger, the answer is not as simple as yes or no, and that is exactly why it needs to be approached carefully. Not all products are harmful, and not every trace element found in testing poses an immediate risk. The human body can handle small amounts of many substances without noticeable effects, and in many cases, the levels detected in supplements are within accepted safety limits. This means that a single scoop of whey protein is unlikely to cause sudden harm, and that is an important point because it prevents unnecessary fear and exaggeration. At the same time, the conversation does not end there because safety is not only about immediate effects, it is also about long term exposure and accumulation over time. Dose plays a central role in understanding risk because the impact of any substance depends on how much of it is consumed and how often. A very small amount taken occasionally may not have the same effect as the same amount taken daily for months or years. This is where routine becomes relevant because whey protein is not used once in a while for many people. It is part of a daily habit. When something is consumed regularly, even small details begin to matter more because they are repeated again and again. This does not mean that every product with minor discrepancies is dangerous, but it does mean that consistency and quality become more important when use is frequent and long term. The idea of long term exposure shifts the focus from short term reactions to gradual impact, which is harder to notice but more meaningful over time. The body does not always show immediate signs when something is slightly off, especially when the differences are small. Instead, changes can occur slowly, influenced by multiple factors including diet, environment, and lifestyle. In this context, the quality of supplements becomes one piece of a larger picture, and even small improvements in that piece can contribute to better overall health in the long run. This perspective encourages a balanced approach where the goal is not to eliminate all risk, but to reduce unnecessary exposure by making informed choices. Staying balanced also means recognizing that many people use whey protein without any noticeable problems, and that the product itself remains a valuable source of nutrition when it is produced correctly. The presence of variability does not erase its benefits, but it does highlight the importance of selecting products that meet higher standards. This is where awareness turns into action because understanding the issue is only useful if it leads to better decisions. The good news is that there are clear and practical ways to reduce uncertainty and improve the chances of choosing a high-quality product. One of the most effective steps is to look for third-party testing, which adds an extra layer of verification beyond the company's own claims. Independent organizations test products to confirm that they meet certain standards for purity, content, and safety. When a product carries this kind of certification, it provides more confidence that what is on the label has been checked by an external source. This does not guarantee perfection, but it significantly reduces the likelihood of major discrepancies. It also shows that the company is willing to be transparent and accountable, which is a strong indicator of quality. Price can also offer useful signals. Even though it is not a perfect measure on its own, extremely cheap products often achieve their low cost by reducing expenses somewhere in the production process, whether through sourcing, processing, or testing. While a higher price does not automatically mean better quality, a price that seems too low compared to the market average can be a reason to look more closely at what might be missing. Balancing cost with quality becomes an important part of the decision because the goal is to find a product that offers reliability without unnecessary compromise. Ingredient transparency is another key factor because a clear and detailed label makes it easier to understand what is being consumed. Products that list their ingredients openly, without hiding behind vague terms or complex blends, allow consumers to make more informed choices. When the label is simple and specific, it reflects a level of confidence from the manufacturer, while overly complicated or unclear labels can raise questions about what is actually inside. Taking a moment to read and understand the label can reveal more than most people expect, especially when comparing different products side by side. Sticking to trusted companies with a track record of quality and consistency can further reduce uncertainty because reputation is often built over time through repeated performance. Brands that have been tested, reviewed, and recognized for maintaining standards are more likely to continue doing so, especially when their credibility depends on it. This does not mean that new or lesser known brands are automatically unreliable, but it does mean that established trust can serve as a useful guide when making decisions in a crowded market. All of these steps come together to form a simple but powerful idea. Good whey protein still exists, you just need to choose wisely, and that choice becomes easier when it is based on awareness rather than assumption. The goal is not to complicate the process, but to make it more intentional, so that each decision reflects a better understanding of what matters and why it matters. Over time, this approach turns a routine habit into a more informed practice, where quality is not left to chance but shaped by careful selection and attention to detail. What all of this really comes down to is not fear and not rejection, but awareness. Whey protein is not the enemy, and it never was. The real issue is the silent assumption that every product is exactly what it claims to be. That assumption is where mistakes begin. Because when something becomes part of your daily routine, it stops feeling like a decision and starts feeling automatic. And automatic choices repeated every single day slowly shape outcomes that most people never connect back to their source. It's not about avoiding whey protein, it's about avoiding blind trust. That one shift changes everything. It turns a passive habit into an active choice. It replaces guessing with understanding. And it gives you control over something that directly affects your body, your energy, and your long term health. Because what you put in your body every day quietly shapes your health in ways that are not always visible right now, but become very real over time. The difference between average results and better results is often hidden in small details like this. The difference between thinking something is helping you and knowing it is helping you comes down to how much attention you give to what you consume. And the truth is simple. You do not need to be perfect. You just need to be aware enough to make better choices than before. If this opened your eyes even a little, then it has already done its job. And there is more to uncover, more simple truths that can completely change how you see everyday health choices without confusion and without noise. So take a moment, like the video if this gave you value, subscribe to the channel for clear and honest health insights, and share this with someone who uses whey protein daily, because they deserve to know what most people never question.